This is Mr. Wesley, and today we are talking about the silence that moves into a marriage like a season. So gradually that by the time you feel the cold, you have forgotten what warmth felt like. You know the silence I am describing. It is not the silence of a bad week or a difficult month. It is not the silence that follows a specific argument that both of you are still processing. This silence is different in quality. It is settled. It has furniture in it. It has been there long enough that you have started to mistake it for the natural atmosphere of a long marriage, rather than a symptom of something that has been changing underneath the surface for longer than you have allowed yourself to measure. You come home and she is there, and the evening passes and nothing is wrong and nothing is right. And somewhere around 10 o'clock, you both go to bed, and you lie there in the dark, next to a woman you have shared a life with for 20 or 25 or 30 years, and you realize that you cannot remember the last time she told you something she was actually thinking. Not the logistics, not the schedule. Something real. Something from inside. And you file that realization away because the alternative, sitting with what it might mean, is more than the evening has room for. That filing away is what I want to talk to you about today. Because in a few minutes, I am going to give you a specific framework for understanding what female emotional silence after 50 actually is, where it comes from, and what it is communicating. Not in the language of blame, not in the language of accusation, but in the plain clinical language of a pattern that has been documented, studied, and observed in long marriages, at a rate that should make every man in this demographic stop and pay attention. But before I give you that framework, you need to understand something foundational about how emotional withdrawal works differently in women over 50 than it does at any other life stage. Because without that foundation, the framework will not make the sense it needs to make. I am Mr. Wesley. I have spent years working with men who are navigating the late chapters of marriages that stopped working long before anyone said so out loud, men who are smart, who are capable, who built good lives and showed up consistently, and still found themselves one day sitting across from a woman who felt like a stranger wearing a familiar face. This channel exists because that experience does not have to arrive without warning. The pattern is readable, the signals are there. Most men simply were never taught what they are looking at. Let me show you what you are looking at. The first thing you need to understand is what researchers who study long-term marriage call midlife marital drift. This is not a crisis in the dramatic sense that the culture tends to package it. It is quieter than that, and more corrosive. Midlife marital drift describes the gradual process by which two people who have been functionally parallel for years, sharing a house, sharing finances, sharing the logistics of children and careers and aging parents, begin to lose the emotional membrane that made them a unit rather than two individuals in proximity. The drift happens slowly. It happens beneath the level of daily awareness. And it accelerates dramatically in women after 50 for reasons that are specific to this life stage, and that most men are entirely unprepared for. Here is what is happening on her side of the marriage at 50, and beyond, that you are almost certainly not seeing clearly. The children, if there were children, are gone or nearly gone. The identity she built around motherhood, and regardless of how career-focused or independent she was, most women of this generation built significant identity architecture around their role as mother. That identity is restructuring itself whether she invited it to or not. The career she has been running in parallel with the marriage is either winding toward its final chapter or has already arrived there. The friendships she maintained through the busy decades are either deepening into something more central or have thinned to almost nothing. Her body is changing in ways that the culture does not discuss with dignity, and that her own mother probably never prepared her for. Her sense of time is shifting. Not abstractly, but viscerally. She is feeling, perhaps for the first time with real urgency, the specific weight of unlived choices. And she is looking at the marriage she is in and asking, quietly, privately, without necessarily telling you she is asking, whether this is the life she wants to spend the remaining years she has, not dramatically, not with ultimatums. Just the quiet arithmetic of a woman who has started counting differently than she did at 35. That arithmetic is the engine of the silence you are living inside. Picture this. There is a man I know, I will call him Robert, who had been married for 31 years when his wife began what he described as a personality change. She became quieter, more self-contained. She started waking up earlier and sitting alone in the kitchen before the house came to life. She joined a book club. She began taking long walks in the evenings alone. She was pleasant. She was functional. She fulfilled every practical requirement of the marriage without complaint. But Robert told me that somewhere in that period he started to feel like he was living with a very polite guest who had no intention of leaving, but also no intention of fully arriving. He could not name what was wrong. When he asked her if she was okay, she said yes. When he asked if something was bothering her, she said no. He told me he started to wonder if he was imagining it. He started to wonder if he was the one with the problem. He was not imagining it. And he was not the problem. He was simply living in a marriage where his wife had entered a stage of internal renegotiation that she had no language to offer him and that he had no framework to recognize. And that combination, her wordlessness and his framelessness, is what allowed 2 years to pass before either of them named what was actually happening. I want to give you the framework Robert did not have. There is a concept in relational psychology called emotional retirement. I want you to hold that phrase because it is precise in a way that matters. Just as a person can retire from a career while continuing to show up at the office out of habit or obligation or financial necessity, a person can retire emotionally from a marriage while continuing to fulfill its external requirements. The lights are on, the meals happen, the bills get paid, the social calendar continues. But the emotional investment, the part of her that used to bring her interior life to you, used to care what you thought about what she was feeling, used to need your witness for her experience, that part has clocked out. It has not necessarily transferred to someone else. It has simply been withdrawn from the shared account and placed somewhere you do not have access to. Emotional retirement in women over 50 is almost never a sudden event. It is a slow divestment that happens across months or years in response to accumulated experiences of not being received. Every time she brought something real to you, and it was minimized, redirected, or met with a solution when she needed presence, that was a small withdrawal. Every time she tried to tell you something about her interior experience and felt your discomfort with the depth of it, that was a small withdrawal. Every time she needed you to sit with her in something difficult and you changed the subject or offered a fix or waited for it to pass, that was a small withdrawal. None of those moments were catastrophic individually, but they compound. And at a certain point, the compounding reaches a threshold and she makes, not always consciously, not always deliberately, a quiet internal decision to stop making deposits into an account that has never reflected back what she put in. The silence you are living in is the sound of that decision. Now, I want to stay here with you for a moment, because I know this is landing in different ways for different men in this room. Some of you are listening to this and feeling something that is uncomfortable to name. The specific discomfort of recognizing your own behavior inside a description you did not ask for. Some of you are sitting with the recognition that you have not been a particularly available emotional presence in your marriage. Not because you are cruel or indifferent, but because nobody taught you how, and because the marriage functioned well enough without it for long enough that the deficit never demanded your attention until now. I want to say something directly to those men. The pattern I am describing is not a character indictment. The inability to receive a woman's emotional experience, to sit with it, to witness it without fixing it or fleeing it, is not a moral failing in the men of this generation. It is an inheritance. You were raised by men who did not do it either, inside a culture that did not ask it of you. And you built marriages in an era that rewarded provision and reliability and stoicism in ways that made emotional availability seem optional rather than structural. You were not told it was load-bearing. You are finding out now. That is not comfortable information, but it is accurate information. And accurate information, even when it is uncomfortable, is the only thing that gives you real options. Let me give you the third framework, because this one is the most actionable of the three. Researchers who study marital communication patterns have identified what they call the 4 channels of female emotional signaling in long marriages. These are the 4 ways a woman communicates the state of her emotional investment in a relationship. Not through direct statement, because direct statement is rarely how emotional truth moves in long marriages, but through behavior, through body, through pattern, and through absence. Most men are fluent in none of these 4 channels, which is why the silence arrives as a surprise rather than a conclusion. The first channel is the complaint channel. When this channel is open, she is bringing you her dissatisfactions, her frustrations, her unmet needs. The complaints feel like the problem. They are not the problem. They are the signal that the channel is still open, that she still believes communication between you is possible, that she has not yet concluded that the distance is permanent. A woman who is complaining is a woman who still wants something from you. The complaint channel closing is not a sign that the problem is solved. It is a sign that she has stopped believing the channel works. The second channel is the request channel. This is subtler than the complaint channel and more easily missed. The request channel carries not her frustrations but her desires. Small requests for connection, for attention, for presence, for acknowledgement. Can we do this together? Did you notice this thing? Will you come and sit with me? These requests, when they go unmet consistently, stop coming. And the day they stop coming is the day she redirects her desire for connection away from you towards something else. A friend, a project, a private interior life that you are not part of. The third channel is the physical channel. Not exclusively sexual, though that is part of it. The physical channel is the entire register of touch, proximity, and body language through which emotional connection is maintained or signaled in a long partnership. When this channel is healthy, there is casual physical contact, a hand on the back moving through the kitchen, a foot touching yours under the table, a proximity that is chosen rather than circumstantial. When this channel begins to close, the physical distance between you becomes neutral rather than warm. She is not pulling away dramatically. She is simply not reaching. And the absence of reach, sustained over months, is the physical language of emotional retirement made visible. The fourth channel is the future channel. This is the one that men most consistently fail to monitor, and the one that carries the most diagnostic information. The future channel is about how she talks, or stops talking, about shared futures, the holiday you are going to take, the retirement plan you are building together, the grandchildren you might have, the house you might downsize into. When the future channel is open, she is placing herself in shared futures with you. When it closes, she stops. The plans become vague. The conversation about what comes next becomes something she deflects or abbreviates. She's not necessarily planning to leave, but she has stopped planning to stay in the way she once did. And that shift in her relationship to your shared future is the earliest and most reliable indicator that the emotional retirement has moved past its beginning stages. Walk through those four channels right now in your mind. Be honest about what you find. Not brutal, honest. Is the complaint channel open or closed? Is she still making requests of you, or has she stopped asking? Is there physical warmth that is chosen, or has the space between you become neutral? Is she still placing herself in your shared future, or have those conversations become something she moves past quickly? The answers to those four questions will tell you more about the actual state of your marriage than anything she has said to you in the last 12 months. Now, here is what I want to give you before we close today. Because this conversation is not designed to leave you sitting in the weight of what you have just recognized without anything to carry forward, the silence in a long marriage after 50 is not always a verdict. For some men in this room, it is. The emotional retirement is complete. The decision has been made, and what is needed now is not a strategy for re-engagement, but a strategy for navigating what comes next with as much clarity and dignity as possible. I will address that road in future videos with the specificity it deserves. But for other men in this room, the silence is not yet a verdict. It is a warning. It is the last readable signal before the signal goes dark. And for those men, there is one thing. Not a list of things, not a program, not a set of techniques. One thing that has the documented capacity to interrupt the trajectory of emotional retirement in a long marriage. It is the experience of being genuinely seen by you. Not performed attention, not scheduled romance, not a sudden conversion to the language of feelings that she will read immediately as fear-motivated and therefore discount entirely. The specific experience of a woman feeling that the man she has been married to for decades has finally become curious about her interior life. Not because he is afraid of losing her, but because he has decided that knowing her matters more than being comfortable. That shift, when it is real, when it is sustained, when it arrives without an agenda attached to it, is the only thing in the research literature that consistently interrupts the emotional retirement pattern in women over 50. Whether you have the capacity for that shift is not something I can tell you. It is something only you can determine by sitting honestly with the question, but you cannot make that determination without knowing what the silence actually means. And now you know. The quietest marriages are not always the most peaceful. Sometimes the quiet is a woman who has finished saying everything she had to say and has not yet decided what to do about the answer she received. Drop a comment. Men, when did you first notice the silence in your marriage? And what story did you tell yourself about what it meant at the time? Subscribe to Relational Insights. Every week, Mr. Wesley breaks down the patterns inside marriage failure, divorce, and what comes after, in the kind of plain language that finally makes the picture clear.